Kickglitch is the quintessential speed tech in Mirror's Edge. It's fast, it's versatile, and it just straight up looks cool as hell. It's one of those pieces of tech that almost single-handedly transforms the run into something that's practically unrecognizable from the vanilla experience. But despite its importance in the run, there is quite a bit of nuance behind it that has yet to be covered in detail and compiled in one convenient location. That's what this video is. Hi, I'm John, CEO of Little Man Studios, and I just want to yap to you about the Kickglitch for a few minutes, if that's okay. To start, whenever the player is in a wall running state and then presses the attack button, Faith will perform a kick off that wall. At the very end of that kick animation, there is exactly one frame where you can input a jump, allowing you to cross significantly larger gaps than with any intended movement option. That's the abridged version anyway, but there is quite a bit more detail that we can dig into here. How fast is a Kickglitch? What's the exact angle we get out of one? What are the lore implications of Faith being able to double jump? What is she doing to jackknife where the camera can't see? Why is she pegging him? It's a common misconception that the reason why you're able to jump is that the game places an invisible floor underneath you for exactly one frame. And while this isn't a terrible way to explain it to someone who's just learning how to do a Kickglitch, what's actually happening is that the game simply puts you into the walking movement state, which gets set back to the falling state on the next tick when the game realizes you're still in the air. The reason it feels like an invisible floor is because the transition into the walking state resets your velocity in the sense that the vertical component gets set to 0 and your horizontal velocity gets clamped down to the normal running speed. To get a full understanding of the Kickglitch, let's first take a look at the specifics of just the kick itself. Now, since I swore a blood oath when I purchased the game, I can't show you the original source code that defines the movement behavior of the kick. But what I can show you is some totally unrelated code from my own legally distinct work in progress and definitely real video game I've called Border of the Reflective Surface. Ultimately, the kick is made up of 3 parts. First, we rotate the camera 32.9599902340767 degrees over a short time span of 1/10 of a second. Next, we apply that same rotate... What? Oh, that's not really all that important. Yeah, that was just for the funny, that wasn't... Oh, jeez. As you can see, instead of using a degree number to describe a rotation, the value that I used for my own very real video game is 6,000 via what's called a rotator, which is a way to describe complex rotations by splitting it into multiple axes, where each rotation of a single axis is represented by a number. A full 360-degree rotation maps to a value of 65,535, which you might recognize as the unsigned 16-bit integer limit, or without the programmer jargon, the biggest number you can represent with 16 zeros and ones. Though that doesn't mean that that's the largest number you can pass into the rotator function. It actually accepts a signed 32-bit integer, which goes up to 2.1 billion. So you could, in theory, make the player spin 32,768 times in a single line of code if you really wanted to. In any case, a value of 6,000 maps to a rotation of almost, but not quite 33 degrees. So there you go, that's why I said 32.9599902340767. You happy? That same rotation is then applied to the player's velocity vector. Of course, we do need to check which side the player is wall running on to know in which direction the rotation should be applied. In case you're confused about these bit shift operators, before Blueprint became a thing in Unreal Engine 4, Unreal Engine 3 still had a regular scripting language called Unreal Script. And one of its features is that the bit shift operator actually becomes a rotation operator when it has a vector to its left and a rotator to its right. Now, if you've ever ran Mirror's Edge, this might not quite align with your experience, because sometimes you get an angle that's obviously way bigger than 33 degrees relative to where you approached the wall from. This happens specifically when you make direct physical contact with the wall. That might sound a bit silly, but the wall running state that allows you to perform the kick actually starts a little bit before you actually touch the wall. A quickly performed kick will give you the 33-degree rotation relative to your starting angle because you technically never actually touch the wall. When you do touch the wall, your velocity first gets redirected to be in line with that wall and then rotated by the same 33 degrees. The last step is to simply multiply the player's velocity vector by 1.2, effectively granting you a 20% speed boost. It's worth noting that this multiplier applies to the z-axis as well, meaning that you actually get more height the earlier you kick after the jump. This 20% speed boost doesn't fully describe the speed gain we get from a Kickglitch though, because the mid-air jump afterwards also nets us a little bit of extra speed. A regular jump adds 100 units of speed to our horizontal velocity, which translates to about 3.78 kilometers per hour. So the exact speed gain from a single Kickglitch is 3.78 kmh from the jump into the wall, 20% of your velocity during the wall run, and then another 3.78 kmh from the jump after the kick. So for example, if our starting speed is 25 kilometers per hour, a Kickglitch will net us a speed increase of about 13.3 kmh. But a starting speed of 22 kilometers per hour will only get an increase of about 12.7 kmh. Generally, we can say that a higher starting speed will result not just in a larger outgoing speed, but a larger increase in speed from a Kickglitch. It's also possible to chain multiple Kickglitches together by starting another wall run after the mid-air jump. This allows you to keep building speed until you inevitably have to touch the ground since you lose a bit of height with each new Kickglitch. What's quite interesting and a little counterintuitive is that no matter how harsh your angle coming into the wall is, this formula for the speed gain remains exactly the same because entering a wall run fully preserves your speed. In most other games, making contact with a wall will pretty much always cause you to lose speed because however much of your velocity that was pointing into the wall is lost in the process. Mirror's Edge doesn't do this, and instead just rotates your entire velocity to be parallel to the wall. The angle we get from a Kickglitch also isn't fully described by the 33 degrees. It's actually possible to very slightly steer yourself by pointing the jump in either direction. Though there is a bit of a trade-off associated with this, which is that you gain less speed overall since the 3.78 kmh impulse is no longer in line with your velocity. Cute little side note, you do not get this impulse at all when you look backwards while jumping. There is a threshold angle for which look direction does and doesn't give you the impulse determined by this dot product calculation, which translates to just barely in front of 90 degrees relative to your velocity, though the exact angle depends on how fast you're going. If you wanted to have a bigger directional change on your Kickglitch, you can also sidestep out of the kick. This is most commonly used as a safety option when the kick sends you off at an angle that would otherwise land you straight in Brazil. That should cover everything I know about the Kickglitch in its most common form, but there are a few variations that pop up in the run in a few places. The first of these is the grounded Kickglitch. Because you get put into the walking state at the end of the kick animation, the Kickglitch is inherently tied to the length of that animation, and it just so happens that the left and right variations of the kick animation have very slightly different lengths. The left wall kick has a runtime of 49 frames, and the right wall kick has a runtime of 45 frames, which is just barely short enough that with proper inputs, the animation ends and puts you into the walking state just before you actually touch the ground, which lets you jump without suffering any ground friction. Significantly more niche and difficult to perform, speedy Kickglitches take advantage of a different mechanic called a glide. The glide is DICE's approach to prevent those awkward situations where you jump near a ledge on the ground and suddenly lose all your speed because one of your toes got caught on that ledge. To avoid this, whenever you jump towards a small ledge on the ground, the game first manually moves you towards that ledge in a straight line and then executes the jump. Now, this straight line motion is crucially much faster than the jump itself. Now, if you were to enter a wall run while you're in this glide, you could avoid the slowdown that happens when you reach the ledge where the jump happens and preserve the speed of the glide. This is what the community calls a speedy wall run, and performing a Kickglitch out of the speedy wall run is now a speedy Kickglitch. As the name suggests, this is much faster than a regular Kickglitch. In fact, doubly so since the 1.2 times multiplier is applied to a much higher starting wall run speed. The most illustrative example for this is Crane Skip in Chapter 3. A regular Kickglitch won't even get you close to crossing this gap, but a speedy Kickglitch will just barely get you enough distance to reach the other side. The timing for a speedy Kickglitch is usually frame perfect at regular speed, so the vast majority of runners make use of the game's reaction time ability, which makes the timing window quite a bit more lenient. Aside from kicking off a wall, there are two other gameplay states that end by putting you into the walking state at the end of their associated animation. Those two are rolling and taking damage from barbed wire. These might seem extremely niche, but they're actually super useful. Not for crossing large gaps, but for falling distances that would otherwise kill you. Usually when you fall for 10 units, you get put into the falling uncontrolled state, which takes away your control, starts playing this really awesome and not at all way too loud noise, and causes you to die once you touch the ground. But that fall distance gets reset when you enter the walking state, meaning that from there, you can safely drop down another 10 units. My favorite example of this in the run is at the end of Chapter 8, where the roll is actually used twice in a row. The first one is to reset the fall distance, and the second one is to set yourself up with a quick sidestep towards the exit. Alright, that concludes today's lecture. Thank you everyone for coming. Before you leave the classroom though, one final thing. I made merch! Look, it's got like arrows on it. It's cool as hell. If you like the idea of supporting me financially while getting some drip in the process, this is a really good way of doing that. You can go to epicswag.nl. Yes, that's the real URL. Don't ask, it's the cheapest domain I could find. I'm also going to show my Patreon here again. I've got monthly updates on production, deep dives for each video where I explain my timeline and everything. Like, look at that. Look. I'm going to explain that on my Patreon and the mess that this is. I also did a lot of multipass compositing for this video, so like for at least 2 of you, that's probably going to be kind of interesting. And if you want to use my 3D assets like my character and you want to make your own animations, that's also available for the highest tier if that sounds interesting to you. Okay, Garmin, Video speichern.